1 week after my son Jacob got married, there was a knock on my front door. It was early afternoon, the kind of quiet hour where the house feels almost too still, as if it is holding its breath. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard it, not loud, not urgent, just confident. When I opened the door, I saw my daughter-in-law, Miranda, standing there with perfect posture and a polite smile that never reached her eyes. Beside her stood a middle-aged man in a dark suit, holding a leather folder tight against his chest. "Susan Barrett," Miranda said calmly. "This is Mr. Thompson. He is a notary. We are here to help you take care of some paperwork." My heart sank, but I did not let it show. At 68 years old, I had learned a lesson life teaches slowly. When someone says they want to help you, you should always ask yourself what they stand to gain. I stepped aside and invited them in, playing the role they expected. The trusting mother, the quiet older woman. I offered coffee. I smiled. Inside, my thoughts were sharp and alert. Miranda's eyes moved around my living room, not lingering on family photos or memories, but on the walls, the furniture, the space. She was already calculating. Mr. Thompson shifted the folder in his hands, ready to begin. They believed this visit would be simple. They believed I was alone. They believed I would sign whatever they placed in front of me. What they did not know was that I had been preparing in silence for months. This knock on my door was not the beginning of my downfall. It was the moment the balance finally shifted. But to understand why, you have to go back to the day everything started to change. The day Jacob told me he was getting married. 3 months before that knock on my door, Jacob came to see me on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, kneading dough the way I always had. The smell of yeast and warm flour filled the room, the same smell Jacob grew up with. When he told me he was getting married, his face lit up in a way I had not seen in years. "Mom, I want you to meet her properly before the wedding," he said. "I really want you to like her." I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled. My son finding love felt like a blessing. I told myself this was the beginning of a bigger family, not the end of anything. The first time I met Miranda, I cooked everything from scratch. Nothing fancy, just honest food made with care. The dishes Jacob loved when he was a boy. I wanted her to feel welcome. She arrived dressed perfectly, hair smooth, nails immaculate. She offered a brief handshake instead of a hug. Her eyes scanned my home in quick, quiet movements. Too quick to be polite, too deliberate to be innocent. During dinner, I tried to ask about her work, her interests, her plans with Jacob. Her answers were short and precise, as if conversation were a task to complete rather than a bridge to build. She tasted the food politely, then set her fork down. "I do not usually eat meals like this," she said lightly. "I am more used to ordering in or dining out." Jacob laughed, trying to soften the moment. "Mom loves cooking," he said. "It is her way of showing love." Miranda smiled, but there was something tight behind it. In the weeks that followed, the pattern continued. She visited with Jacob but never settled in. She perched on the edge of the couch. She checked her phone often. She never asked how I was doing. One afternoon, while I poured coffee, she said something that stayed with me. "You will probably enjoy having more time for yourself after the wedding, Susan. Couples need space, you know." At the time, I nodded, pretending not to hear the quiet dismissal in her voice. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being overly sensitive. I chose peace over confrontation. I did not realize then that what I was ignoring were not small signs. They were warnings. The wedding day arrived brighter than I expected, all blue sky and soft sunlight, as if nothing painful could possibly happen. I woke before dawn and took my time getting ready. I chose a simple but elegant dress, one I had saved for a moment that mattered. I wanted to look like what I was, the mother of the groom, a woman proud of her son. At the church, I arrived early, as I always do. Guests filled the pews slowly, laughing and greeting one another. I smiled and accepted congratulations, telling myself this was a happy day, that families come together on days like this. When the ceremony began, I realized something was wrong. Miranda had arranged the seating. I was placed several rows back behind people I barely knew. Friends from work, distant relatives, people who had met Jacob only a handful of times. From my seat, I had to lean forward just to see my son standing at the altar. As Jacob walked down the aisle, my chest tightened. I had imagined watching him from the front, the way mothers do. Instead, I felt like an afterthought. During the reception, the feeling deepened. Miranda introduced me to her guests as Jacob's mother, never once saying my name. When she did mention me, it was always the same way. "She cooks very well," she said with a practiced smile, as if that single skill summarized my entire life. I waited patiently for the toasts. I had prepared words filled with love, memories of Jacob as a child, hopes for his future. But one by one, Miranda called on her family, her friends, even co-workers. When someone finally asked about the groom's mother, she glanced at me briefly. "Oh yes, Susan can say a few short words," she said. "Short." I stood, my legs unsteady. I began speaking, my voice trembling but sincere. I had barely finished my second sentence when applause erupted. Too early, too loud. Miranda was clapping. The room followed. My words disappeared into the noise. For dinner, I was seated at a back table. Jacob laughed across the room with his new family. I watched him, smiling at jokes I could not hear, living a moment I was no longer part of. When the dancing began, he danced with Miranda, then with her mother, then with her sisters. He never came for me. Near the end of the night, I touched his arm and told him I was heading home. He hugged me quickly, distracted, already turning away. As I walked to my car, I heard laughter behind me. Someone joked about mothers-in-law needing boundaries. I sat in the driver's seat, hands shaking. That night, I did not just leave a wedding. I left a place in my son's life that I would never get back the same way again. The days after the wedding felt strangely quiet. I waited for Jacob to call. I told myself he was busy, newly married, traveling, starting a new chapter. Still, I checked my phone more times than I would ever admit. When I finally did hear from him, his voice sounded different, polite, careful, as if he were speaking to someone he no longer knew well. "Miranda sends her regards," he said once. "We are sorting things out. I will call you later." Later rarely came. A week passed, then another. I decided not to sit with the silence anymore. I baked Jacob's favorite cookies, the same recipe I'd made since he was 10 years old. Chocolate and walnuts, simple, familiar. I drove to their house one afternoon, hopeful in a quiet way, not expecting much, just wanting to see my son. Miranda opened the door. She smiled, surprised but not pleased. "Oh, Susan, I was not expecting you." I held up the basket. "I brought cookies for Jacob." She took it without stepping aside, without inviting me in. "Jacob is busy right now," she said. "Important meeting. I will let him know you stopped by." I stood there for a moment, waiting for something else. An invitation. A question. Anything. It did not come. The door closed gently but firmly. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the steering wheel, trying to understand when visiting my own child had started to feel like an intrusion. At home, I walked through the rooms slowly. Every corner held a memory. Homework at the kitchen table. Late-night talks in the living room. Jacob laughing, Jacob crying, Jacob growing. I realized then that I was not losing him by accident. I was being moved aside on purpose. That night, as I sat alone with a cup of tea, I remembered something my husband once told me. "Susan, if you ever feel pushed out of your own life, pay attention. Love does not erase people. Control does." For the first time since the wedding, I stopped blaming myself. And I started watching more closely. That night, sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of a house that had once been full of noise and life. My thoughts kept circling back to Jacob as a little boy, running down the hallway, calling my name without hesitation. Somewhere along the way, that certainty had disappeared. I got up just before midnight and walked to the bedroom closet. Behind a row of coats sat a small safe I had not opened in months. I knelt down, turned the dial, and lifted the heavy door. Inside were the documents my husband had insisted I keep organized: titles, insurance papers, old letters. At the bottom lay a folder I had avoided for a long time. My husband's handwriting was on the label. I remembered his voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. "Susan, if anything ever happens to me, promise you will never let anyone take your choices away. Not even family." At the time I had laughed softly and told him he worried too much. Now, sitting on the floor with those papers spread out in front of me, I finally understood what he meant. What I found that night was not just about money, it was proof of independence. Proof that I did not need permission to exist on my own terms. I closed the safe slowly and stood up. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. The sadness did not disappear, but it hardened into clarity. I made a quiet decision. I would tell no one about what I had found, not Jacob, not Miranda. I would watch, I would listen. And I would never sign anything again without understanding exactly why I was being asked to. That night marked the moment I stopped waiting to be included and started preparing to protect myself. The first suggestion came wrapped in concern. Miranda started calling more often, not to ask how I was feeling, not to invite me over. Each call followed the same gentle pattern. "Susan," she said one afternoon, "have you ever thought about how much work your house must be for you now?" I laughed lightly, pretending not to understand. "I have managed just fine for years." "Of course you have," she replied quickly. "We just worry. Big houses can be overwhelming as people get older. Maintenance, repairs, safety, it is a lot." A few days later, Jacob repeated the same words, almost exactly. "Mom, Miranda and I have been talking about your future. We just want you to be comfortable." Your future. The phrase sounded strange coming from my son, as if my life had become a project he was managing rather than something I was living. They suggested downsizing, selling the house, something easier, they said, something simpler. Miranda framed it carefully. "If you sold, you would have more freedom, you could travel, relax, we could even help manage the money so you do not have to worry." Help manage the money. I began to hear what they were not saying. The pattern was too neat, too practiced. Always the same message, delivered with soft voices and patient smiles. One evening, Jacob came by in person. He sat on the edge of the couch like a guest, not like a son who had once stretched out on that same sofa with his head in my lap. "Mom," he said, avoiding my eyes, "do you ever feel tired lately?" I looked at him carefully. "I feel my age sometimes. That is normal." "Miranda thinks a smaller place might be safer for you," he continued, "and maybe having us handle the finances would take some pressure off." I watched his hands as he spoke. He twisted his keys the way he did as a teenager when he was nervous or unsure. This was not his idea. I asked a simple question. "If I sell my house, where would I live?" They exchanged a glance, quick, practiced. "We can look at options together," Miranda said. "There are very nice communities with support and care." Support and care. What they meant was control. That night, after Jacob left, I sat alone and replayed every conversation in my head. The words worried, comfortable, safer. They all pointed in the same direction. For the first time, I allowed myself to name what was happening. This was not concern. This was preparation. And I was no longer willing to pretend otherwise. The next morning, I called Helen. Helen Brooks had been my closest friend for more than 40 years. She knew my voice well enough to hear what I was not saying. "Susan," she said gently after I told her everything, "this is not normal concern. This is pressure." That afternoon, she drove me downtown to see an attorney she trusted, David Coleman. His office was quiet, lined with books and framed certificates that spoke of long experience rather than ambition. He listened without interrupting as I explained the wedding, the visits, the suggestions, the tone that never quite matched the words. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "What you are describing fits a common pattern," he said calmly. "Financial manipulation of older adults often begins with isolation, then concern, then urgency." The word urgency made my stomach tighten. He explained how easily people lose their homes and independence by signing documents they do not fully understand. Often, he said, the pressure comes from family. "What should I do?" I asked. "First, do not sign anything," he said firmly. "Second, document everything. Conversations, visits, requests. Let them reveal their intentions." I nodded slowly. For the first time since the wedding, I did not feel foolish or dramatic. I felt informed. When I left his office, Helen squeezed my hand. "You are not alone," she said, "and you are not powerless." That night, I went home and slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the problem was gone, but because I finally had a plan. They came back 3 days later. This time, Jacob did not come alone. Miranda walked beside him, holding a thick folder against her chest the way people do when they believe they already own what is inside. I invited them in and watched as they sat across from me, both wearing the same careful expressions, concern mixed with patience. The look people use when they think they are dealing with someone fragile. "Mom," Jacob began, his voice slow and measured, "we just want to make sure you are taken care of." Miranda opened the folder and spread the papers neatly on the table. "We have been doing a lot of research," she said, "talking to professionals. Everyone agrees it would be best to simplify things." Simplify was her favorite word. She pointed to the first page. "This outlines the sale of your house. After that, the money would be placed in a managed account, jointly, so we can help protect you." I leaned forward slightly, squinting as if the text were hard to read. "If I sell the house," I asked quietly, "where do I go?" Miranda did not hesitate. "We found a lovely assisted living community, very safe, very comfortable. You would not have to worry about anything." "Assisted living?" Jacob nodded. "They have activities, Mom, doctors, other people your age." Other people your age, as if I had suddenly stopped belonging anywhere else. I looked down at the papers again, letting my hands tremble just enough to match the role they had already assigned me. "This is a lot to take in," I said softly. "I need time to think." Miranda smiled, though there was tension behind it. "Of course. But we should not wait too long. These decisions are easier when they are made early." Early. That word confirmed everything. They were not planning for my future. They were planning around it. When they left, I remained at the table long after the door closed, staring at the empty space where the papers had been. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a plan. And I was ready for the next move. They returned on Saturday afternoon. Miranda arrived first, confident and composed, followed closely by Jacob and a man I had never met before. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. His smile was polite but distant. "Susan," Miranda said warmly, "this is Mr. Allen. He is a notary. We thought it would be easier if everything was handled properly today." Handled properly. I invited them in and asked everyone to sit. I had already placed a small recorder in my apron pocket, just as David Coleman had advised. My hands were calm, my breathing steady. Mr. Allen opened his briefcase and began laying documents across the table with practiced ease. "These papers will allow us to move forward efficiently," he said. "Property transfer, financial authorization, and future care arrangements." Future care. Miranda leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a kindness. "Once this is done, you will not have to worry about decisions anymore. We will take care of everything." I picked up the pen he placed in front of me. It felt heavier than it should have. "What if I change my mind later?" I asked quietly. Miranda smiled with visible effort. "These arrangements are meant to be permanent. Stability is important at your stage of life." At your stage of life? I felt the weight of every word pressing in on me, the house, the money, my freedom, all reduced to inconvenience. Just as I moved the pen toward the paper, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the room like a blade. Miranda stiffened. Jacob looked confused. Mr. Allen frowned. "Are you expecting someone?" he asked sharply. "Yes," I said, standing slowly. "I am." When I opened the door, Helen stood there, calm and steady. Beside her was David Coleman, his briefcase in hand. "Good afternoon, Susan," David said. "I hope we are not interrupting." The room fell silent as they entered. Jacob's face drained of color. Miranda's confidence faltered for the first time. David placed his briefcase on the table and looked around. "I represent Susan Barrett," he said clearly. "I understand legal documents were about to be signed today. I will be supervising this process." No one spoke. The balance in the room shifted instantly. What had moments ago felt like a trap now felt like exposure. And for the first time since the wedding, I was no longer the smallest voice in the room. For several seconds, no one moved. Mr. Allen slowly closed his briefcase, his confident posture dissolving into something cautious. Miranda straightened in her chair, her expression tightening as if she were recalculating her next words. "There must be a misunderstanding," she said lightly. "We were only trying to help Susan organize things." David Coleman looked at the documents on the table without touching them. Helping does not usually involve urgency, joint control, and permanent decisions made without independent counsel, he replied calmly. Jacob stared at the papers as if seeing them for the first time. Mom, he said quietly, you did not tell me you had a lawyer. I met his eyes. You did not ask me what I wanted. The words hung between us, heavy and undeniable. Mr. Allen cleared his throat. Given the circumstances, I think it would be best if I stepped away from this matter. He gathered his things quickly and left without another word. Miranda stood next. Her voice was sharper now. We were just trying to protect you. I shook my head slowly. Protection does not remove choice. It does not take homes or silence people. Jacob remained seated, his shoulders slumped. I am not signing anything today, I said evenly. Or ever, without my own advice. David closed his folder. That concludes this meeting. They left shortly after. The house fell quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like relief. For the first time in months, I sat in my own living room without feeling cornered. The fear had not won. Clarity had. In the days that followed, I did not feel triumphant. There was no rush of celebration, no sense of revenge the way people imagine it. What I felt instead was calm, the kind that settles in after a long storm finally passes. Jacob called a few times. His voice sounded unsure, stripped of the confidence Miranda had always supplied for him. We spoke carefully, honestly, but without rushing toward forgiveness. I told him something I had never said out loud before. I love you. But love does not mean I give up my right to decide my own life. He did not argue. I stayed in my home for a while longer, long enough to decide what I wanted, not what anyone else thought was best for me. Eventually I chose to move, not because I was pushed, not because I was afraid, because it was my decision. I downsized on my own terms, I kept control of my finances, I set clear boundaries. Visits happened when they were respectful. Calls came when they were genuine. Miranda stopped calling altogether. What I gained was not just safety or security, it was something deeper. I regained ownership of my time, my space, my voice. I learned that strength does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like patience, preparation, knowing when to wait and when to stand firm. This was not the victory they expected, but it was the one that mattered most to me. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see at the time. The hardest part was never the paperwork, the pressure, or even the betrayal. The hardest part was realizing how easily love can be mistaken for obedience. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant staying quiet, staying agreeable, staying out of the way once my child grew up. I believed sacrifice was proof of love. I was wrong. Love does not require erasing yourself. Family does not earn the right to control your choices. And age does not cancel your right to dignity. My name is Susan Barrett. I am 68 years old. I am a mother, a widow, and a woman who chose to protect her life instead of shrinking inside it. What I learned is simple but powerful. Silence can keep you safe for a while, but speaking up at the right moment can save everything. If you are watching this and something feels familiar, trust that feeling. Ask questions. Take your time. Get advice. Do not let urgency push you into decisions you do not understand. And if someone truly loves you, they will respect your boundaries instead of trying to remove them. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in my place. And if you believe stories like this matter, stay with us. Because it is never too late to choose yourself.